On the day of Mrs. Eleanor Walsh's 70th birthday party, her son Brandon yelled at me, "Nobody wants you here anymore, Maggie. Just leave." His wife threw the celebratory cake I'd spent 2 days preparing onto the marble floor, but what I did next made every guest in that mansion freeze, and by the following morning, the Walsh family's perfect life began to crumble like dry autumn leaves. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next in this story. And write in the comments what city or state you're listening from. It truly warms my heart to know my words are reaching you, wherever you are. Now, let's begin. My name is Margaret Ann Sullivan, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 47 years old, and for the past 22 years, I've been the live-in housekeeper for the Walsh family in their sprawling estate in Westchester County, New York. 22 years. That's more than 2 decades of my life spent polishing their silverware, ironing their designer clothes, preparing their meals, and essentially running their household while remaining functionally invisible. I started working for the Walshes when I was 25, fresh off a Greyhound bus from Scranton, Pennsylvania, with nothing but a duffel bag and $137 in my pocket. My mother had just passed from cancer, leaving me with a mountain of medical debt and no real prospects. The employment agency sent me to interview at the Walsh estate, and Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, then a vibrant woman in her late 40s, hired me on the spot. "You have kind eyes, Margaret," she'd said, studying me across her pristine white kitchen island. "And strong hands. Those are the 2 things I value most in help." Help. That word should have told me everything I needed to know about my place in this world, but I was desperate, grieving, and the salary she offered, $32,000 a year plus room and board, seemed like a fortune compared to the $8.50 an hour I'd been making at the diner back home. The room they gave me was actually the converted maid's quarters above the garage, a small studio with slanted ceilings, a twin bed, a hot plate, and a bathroom so tiny you had to sit sideways on the toilet. But it was mine, and it was warm, and after months of sleeping on my cousin's couch, it felt like sanctuary. Those first few years, Mrs. Walsh was kind enough. Not warm, exactly, but fair. She taught me how she liked things done, the precise way to fold fitted sheets into perfect squares, the specific brand of furniture polish for the antique credenza in the dining room, the temperature at which to serve her morning coffee, 185 degrees Fahrenheit, not a degree cooler. Mr. Charles Walsh, a successful corporate attorney, barely noticed my existence. He was a tall, imposing man who communicated primarily through grunts and the rustle of the Wall Street Journal. Their son Brandon was 15 when I started, a lanky teenager with acne and an attitude. He'd leave his sneakers in the middle of the hallway for me to trip over, blast rap music at 2 a.m., and once locked me out on the second-floor balcony during a thunderstorm because he thought it was funny. But teenage boys grow up, I told myself. They mature. I was wrong about that. The dynamic really shifted about 12 years ago when Mr. Walsh died suddenly of a heart attack on the tennis court at their country club. He was 63. Mrs. Walsh withdrew into herself, and Brandon, then 27 and working at a hedge fund, moved back into the family home with his new wife, Ashley. Ashley Pemberton Walsh was everything I wasn't. She was 24, blonde, Princeton-educated, and came from old Connecticut money. She had the kind of beauty that requires constant maintenance, weekly blowouts, monthly facials, quarterly Botox appointments that she scheduled into the family calendar like business meetings. She spoke to me in that specific tone wealthy people use with service staff, bright and cheerful on the surface, but with an undertone that reminds you exactly where you stand in the pecking order. "Oh, Maggie, would you mind terribly?" Every sentence started that way. Would you mind terribly picking up my dry cleaning, walking my Pomeranian, scrubbing the grout in the guest bathroom with a toothbrush, reorganizing my closet by color and season, returning the cashmere sweater I wore once to Bergdorf's? I minded. God, how I minded. But what choice did I have? By then, I'd been there a decade. I was 35 years old with no college degree, no real savings. Most of my salary went to paying off Mom's medical bills, and no other prospects. I was trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, and we all knew it. The years blurred together in a haze of early mornings and late nights. I'd wake at 5:30 a.m. to start Mrs. Walsh's breakfast, Greek yogurt with honey and fresh berries, whole wheat toast, lightly toasted, barely any butter, and that precisely heated coffee. Then I'd prepare whatever elaborate meal Ashley had planned for the evening, do 3 loads of laundry, vacuum 6,000 square feet of hardwood and carpet, and fall into my narrow bed around 11 p.m., exhausted. My only real day off was Sunday afternoon, from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. 6 hours a week to be human, to be Maggie instead of the help. I usually spent it at the public library, reading novels, and pretending I was someone else, somewhere else. But here's what nobody tells you about long-term domestic service: you become part of the architecture. You're there, always there, moving through their lives like a ghost. You hear everything, the fights, the secrets, the private phone calls. You know when Brandon got that junior analyst at his firm pregnant and paid for her abortion. You know Mrs. Walsh takes Xanax every night and has for years. You know Ashley had an affair with the landscaper 2 summers ago. You know everything, and you're expected to know nothing. 3 years ago, they had twins, Braden and Addison. Beautiful children with Brandon's dark hair and Ashley's blue eyes. My duties expanded again. Now I wasn't just housekeeper but de facto nanny when Ashley had her Pilates classes or lunch dates with the girls. I changed diapers, prepared bottles, sang lullabies, soothed nightmares. Those babies knew my arms as well as their mothers, maybe better. And through it all, I saved. Every spare dollar that didn't go to basic necessities went into a checking account at a bank in White Plains, far enough from the Walsh orbit that I didn't risk running into them. It was my secret, my insurance policy, my emergency escape hatch. After 22 years, even with the medical debt finally paid off, I had managed to save $47,000. Not exactly a fortune, but enough. Enough for what, I didn't exactly know yet. Just enough. The relationship with the family had calcified into something cold and transactional over the years. Mrs. Walsh now treated me like a particularly useful appliance. She'd walk past me in the hallway without making eye contact, leave notes about tasks on the kitchen counter instead of speaking to me directly. Brandon was openly contemptuous, snapping his fingers when he wanted something, calling me girl even though I was old enough to be his older sister. But Ashley was the worst. Ashley had a gift for cruelty disguised as concern. "Oh Maggie, those jeans are looking a bit snug, are you stress eating again?" "Maggie, I noticed some gray in your hair, there's a box of Clairol under the sink if you want to do something about that." "Maggie, maybe you should think about a gym membership, I'd hate for your back to give out with all the heavy lifting you do." Every comment was a paper cut, small enough to seem insignificant, frequent enough to bleed you dry. About 6 months ago, Ashley started making noise about restructuring the household budget. "That's corporate speak for we want to pay you less." She sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I ate my solitary meals while they dined in the formal dining room, and explained that they'd be reducing my salary by $8,000 annually. "It's nothing personal, Maggie," she said, her veneers gleaming. "We're just trying to be smart about expenses." You understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that Ashley's new Mercedes G-Wagon cost $180,000. I understood that they'd just returned from a 2-week vacation in St. Bart's. I understood that I was the line item they could cut without social consequences. I said nothing. I nodded. I went back to work. But something small and hard formed in my chest that day, like a seed of coal waiting for the right pressure to transform into diamond. Then came Mrs. Walsh's 70th birthday. Ashley decided to host the party at the estate, naturally. She'd been planning it for months, turning it into the social event of the season. She'd hired an event coordinator, a florist, a string quartet, even a professional photographer. 100 guests were expected, society matrons, country club friends, Brandon's colleagues, Ashley's sorority sisters who'd married well. My role, of course, was to be invisible support staff. For 2 weeks leading up to the party, I worked 16-hour days. Deep cleaning the house until every surface gleamed, polishing silver serving pieces that hadn't been used in years, pressing tablecloths and napkins, setting up the rented tables and chairs in the garden. But the main event, my piece de resistance, was the cake. Mrs. Walsh had mentioned, months ago in passing, that she loved German chocolate cake. Not the box mix version, but the real thing, made from scratch with sweet baking chocolate, coconut pecan frosting, and layers so moist they practically melted on your tongue. It was her mother's recipe, she'd said, something from her childhood in Charleston. I spent weeks perfecting it. I baked test cakes on my Sunday afternoons, adjusting the ratios, experimenting with different brands of chocolate, getting the frosting consistency just right. I even special ordered premium German's chocolate from a specialty supplier in Manhattan. The final version was a masterpiece. 3 layers of deep brown cake, each one perfectly level. The coconut pecan frosting, made with real butter, evaporated milk, and freshly toasted coconut, had the ideal texture, thick enough to stay in place but soft enough to spread like silk. I decorated the top with delicate chocolate curls I'd spent an hour creating with a vegetable peeler and a block of bittersweet chocolate. It wasn't just a cake. It was an offering, a gesture of something I didn't even want to name. Maybe respect. Maybe a desperate plea to be seen. Maybe just proof that I had value beyond my ability to scrub toilets and fold laundry. I worked on it for 2 full days, baking the layers, making the frosting, assembling it with the precision of an architect. It sat in the refrigerator in my garage studio because I didn't trust anyone in the main house not to damage it accidentally. On the morning of the party, I carried it carefully down the garage stairs, across the driveway, and into the kitchen, where I placed it on the marble island under a glass dome. The party started at 2 p.m. on a perfect June Saturday. The weather had cooperated, 75 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, a gentle breeze that made the garden look like something from a magazine spread. The string quartet played Vivaldi. Waiters in black ties circulated with trays of champagne and canapés. Women in designer sundresses and men in blazers air-kissed and laughed their practiced, country club laughs. And I worked. I worked like I always did, refilling chafing dishes, clearing empty glasses, restocking the bar, staying 3 steps ahead of needs before they became requests. I wore my standard uniform, black slacks, white button-down shirt, sensible black flats. My hair pulled back in a tight bun. Invisible. Mrs. Walsh held court in the garden, resplendent in a cream silk dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. She accepted compliments and birthday wishes with the gracious condescension of minor royalty. Brandon stood at her elbow in his custom-tailored suit, every inch the devoted son. Ashley flitted from group to group in a pink dress that showed off her gym-toned arms, playing the perfect hostess. Nobody acknowledged my existence except to hand me their empty glasses. Around 4 p.m., as the party hit its peak, Ashley made an announcement. Everyone. Could I have your attention, please? She clinked her champagne flute with a fork, and the crowd quieted. As you all know, we're here to celebrate Eleanor's 70th birthday, 7 decades of grace, wisdom, and style. Polite applause. And what's a birthday without cake? We've ordered an absolutely stunning creation from Sylvia Weinstock. She paused for effect. Everyone knew Weinstock was the most exclusive cake designer in Manhattan, with creations starting at $5,000, and we're about to bring it out. My stomach dropped. We. She said we, as if she'd had anything to do with it. As if she hadn't delegated the entire party to me while she got weekly spa treatments. 2 catering staff I'd never seen before emerged from the house carrying an enormous, elaborate cake, 5 tiers covered in intricate sugar flowers. The whole thing probably cost $8,000. It was beautiful in an ostentatious, look at how much money we spent kind of way. The crowd oohed and awed appropriately. The photographer snapped pictures. Mrs. Walsh smiled her practiced smile. And I stood at the edge of the garden, holding a tray of empty champagne flutes, and felt something inside me crack. My cake, the German chocolate cake I'd spent 2 days perfecting, the one made with love and skill and the desperate hope of recognition, sat forgotten in the kitchen under its glass dome. Nobody had even asked about it. Nobody cared. The party continued. The expensive Weinstock cake was cut and served on Limoges china plates. Guests exclaimed over how delicious it was. It was fine, technically proficient but soulless. You could taste the commercial kitchen it came from. Mrs. Walsh posed for photos. Brandon gave a toast about how wonderful his mother was. Ashley beamed, soaking up reflected glory. At 6 p.m., Ashley found me in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. Maggie, there you are, she said in that bright, sharp voice. We need you to clear the dessert plates from the garden. And then you should probably start breaking down the tables. The rental company is picking them up at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Of course, I said automatically. She started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Maggie? What is this? She lifted the glass dome from my cake, which still sat pristine and untouched on the island. That's a German chocolate cake I made for Mrs. Walsh, I said quietly. She mentioned months ago that it was her favorite. Ashley's perfectly microbladed eyebrows rose. You made this? For the party? Yes. I thought. Maggie. She laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. We hired Sylvia Weinstock. Do you have any idea what that means? What that signals to our guests? And you thought we'd serve this? She gestured at my cake like it was something I'd found in a dumpster. The crack inside me widened. I worked really hard on it, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. I wanted Mrs. Walsh to have something special, something homemade with care. That's sweet, Maggie, really. Ashley's tone made it clear she thought it was anything but sweet. But honestly, this is why we hired professionals. Homemade is, well, it's a little sad, don't you think? A little desperate? Each word was a blade, precisely placed. I thought Mrs. Walsh would appreciate. Maggie, listen to me. Ashley leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You're the help. That's your job. You're not part of the family. You're not a guest. You don't get to make creative decisions about important events. We pay you to execute tasks, not to think. Do you understand the distinction? 22 years. 22 years of swallowing words, of biting my tongue, of accepting my place. 22 years of that specific tone, those precise little cruelties. The crack became a fissure. Now, Ashley continued, checking her phone, we have about 40 guests still here, and they're starting to leave. You need to be out front thanking people for coming as they exit. It's good optics to show we have attentive staff. And for God's sake, smile. You've had this dark expression on your face all day. It's bringing down the energy. She walked out, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my beautiful, rejected cake. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the 3 perfect layers, the carefully crafted frosting, the delicate chocolate curls. 2 days of work. Weeks of practice. Years of invisible service. I picked up the cake stand and walked out to the garden. The party was winding down. Maybe 50 guests remained, scattered in small clusters, finishing their wine. Mrs. Walsh sat in a cushioned chair surrounded by a group of her bridge club friends. Brandon and Ashley stood near the bar, laughing with a couple I vaguely recognized from previous parties. I walked up to Mrs. Walsh's group and set the cake down on the decorative table beside her. Mrs. Walsh, I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I made you a German chocolate cake. Your favorite. The one you told me about, from your mother's recipe. Mrs. Walsh looked up, startled. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Recognition? Then her gaze slid past me to Ashley, who was already moving toward us, her face a mask of polite alarm. Oh, Maggie, Mrs. Walsh said with a vague smile. That's very thoughtful. But we already had cake, dear. I know, I said. But this one is special. I made it specifically for you. The group of bridge club ladies looked uncomfortable. This wasn't how help was supposed to behave, inserting themselves into social situations, demanding attention. Ashley arrived, her hand clamping onto my elbow with surprising force. Maggie, can I speak with you inside, please? Her voice was sugar-coated steel. No, I said. The single syllable hung in the air like a grenade. Excuse me? Ashley's grip tightened. No, I repeated, louder. I'm not going inside. I've worked here for 22 years. I've given this family everything. And for once, I'd like Mrs. Walsh to acknowledge something I've done. The garden had gone quiet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned to us. Brandon appeared at Ashley's side. Maggie, what the hell is going on? His face was flushed, from alcohol or anger, I couldn't tell. I made a cake for your mother, I said, meeting his eyes. I'd like her to try it. Jesus Christ. Brandon laughed, that harsh, dismissive sound. This is what we're doing? In the middle of Mom's birthday party? You're having a meltdown over a fucking cake? The profanity made several guests gasp softly. Brandon, Mrs. Walsh said weakly. No, Mom, this is ridiculous. Brandon turned his full attention to me, and I saw something ugly flash across his face, the same expression he'd had when he was 15 and locked me on the balcony. Nobody wants your cake, Maggie. Nobody asked for it. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing us. Just take it back to the kitchen and do your job. My job, I repeated softly. Yes. Your job. The thing we pay you for. Which, frankly, we're overpaying for at this point. He was on a roll now, feeding off the audience, off Ashley's approving nod. You're not a chef. You're a housekeeper. You clean toilets and fold laundry. That's your value. That's your contribution. And if you can't accept that, if you're going to create drama at family events, then maybe it's time we had a serious conversation about whether you're still the right fit for this household. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt my face burning, felt the weight of 50 pairs of eyes on me, some pitying, some disgusted, some merely entertained by the spectacle. Ashley seized the moment. She grabbed the cake stand from the table and, in one swift, brutal motion, turned it upside down. The German chocolate cake, my masterpiece, my offering, crashed onto the flagstone patio. Frosting splattered. Chocolate crumbs scattered. The cake I'd spent 2 days making was now a ruined mess at my feet. There, Ashley said brightly. Problem solved. Now, Maggie, I think it's best if you go back to your quarters and stay there for the rest of the evening. We'll discuss your future employment tomorrow. But before I could move, before I could process what had just happened, Brandon delivered the final blow. Honestly, Maggie? He shook his head, looking at me with undisguised contempt. Nobody wants you here anymore. Not me, not Ashley, not even Mom, though she's too polite to say it. We're all tired of you. Tired of your martyrdom, tired of your lurking presence, tired of pretending you're something other than hired help. So just leave. Go away. The fissure became a chasm. And in that chasm, something extraordinary happened. The part of me that had spent 22 years bending, accommodating, accepting, forgiving, that part simply ceased to exist. It didn't shatter dramatically. It just stopped. Like a light switch flipping off. I looked at Brandon's red face. At Ashley's triumphant smirk. At Mrs. Walsh's carefully neutral expression. At the ruined cake on the ground. At the 50 guests watching this tableaus of my humiliation. And I felt nothing. No anger. No hurt. No embarrassment. Just a crystalline, perfect clarity. All right, I said quietly. I untied the apron I'd been wearing and folded it neatly, habit, even now. I set it on the table where my cake had been moments before. Margaret, wait, Mrs. Walsh started, finally finding her voice, but I held up one hand. I'm done, Mrs. Walsh. After 22 years, I'm done. I walked through the silent garden, past the shocked guests, past the string quartet that had stopped mid-Vivaldi. I walked through the house I'd cleaned 10,000 times. I climbed the stairs to my studio above the garage. The whole walk took maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like crossing a continent. Once inside my small room, I sat on my narrow bed and waited for the emotion to hit, the tears, the rage, the regret. But there was only that pure, clear silence. The silence of a decision made. The silence of a door closing after 22 years. I looked around my room. At the few possessions I'd accumulated. At the life I'd built in this 400 square foot space. And I knew, with absolute certainty, what I needed to do next. I opened my laptop, a 5-year-old Dell I'd bought refurbished, and logged into my bank account. $47,000. 22 years of saved scraps. It was enough. It was more than enough. I started making calls. The calls I made that night would change everything, but I didn't know that yet. I only knew that the woman who had said yes for 22 years had finally learned to say no, and there was no going back. First, I called my friend Rita. Rita Fernandez and I had met 7 years ago at the Westchester County Public Library, my sanctuary on those precious Sunday afternoons. She was a paralegal at a small family law firm in White Plains, divorced, no kids, with a dry sense of humor and a studio apartment she'd invited me to visit dozens of times. I'd always declined, too exhausted, too worried about being away from the Walsh estate for too long, too trapped in the invisible chains I'd worn for so long I'd forgotten they were there. Maggie? Her voice was thick with sleep. It was nearly 9 p.m., and Rita was an early-to-bed person. Everything okay? I quit, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign and powerful. Silence. Then, wait, what? You quit the Walshes? Like, tonight? What happened? I told her. All of it. The cake, the humiliation, Brandon's words, Ashley's cruelty. My voice remained steady throughout, which surprised me. It was as if I were recounting someone else's story, a narrative I'd read in a book. Jesus Christ, Maggie. Rita's voice had gone from sleepy to sharp. Those people are monsters. You should have left years ago. I know. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? That was the question, wasn't it? I looked around my studio, at the hot plate, the narrow bed, the slanted ceiling that I'd hit my head on countless times. This room had been my entire world for 22 years, and suddenly it felt like a prison cell. I have some money saved, I said. Enough to rent a place, get started. I was wondering, do you know anyone who's looking for a roommate? Maggie. Rita's voice softened. My couch is yours. Hell, I'll sleep on the couch, you take the bed. You can stay as long as you need. No rent until you get on your feet. The offer was so unexpected, so generous, that I felt my carefully maintained composure crack just slightly. Rita, I can't. Yes, you can. You're coming here. Pack your stuff tonight. I'll come get you first thing tomorrow morning. Don't argue with me. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy, and besides, acceptance felt like another small revolution. For 22 years, I'd been the one offering help, bending to accommodate others' needs. Receiving felt almost transgressive. After I hung up with Rita, I made my second call. This one was harder. I dialed the number for an attorney, Marcus Chen, someone Rita had mentioned worked in employment law. I left a voicemail, my voice steady. Mr. Chen, my name is Margaret Sullivan. I've just resigned from a position where I was employed as a live-in domestic worker for 22 years. I have questions about unpaid overtime, wage violations, and possibly constructive dismissal. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I had no idea if I had a case. I had no idea what any of those legal terms really meant. But I knew, with that same crystalline clarity, that I wasn't going to just walk away quietly into the night. Not anymore. The third call was the one that would prove most consequential, though I didn't know it then. I googled Westchester catering companies and found a listing for Bella Tavola Events, a mid-sized operation in Scarsdale. Their website showed elegant table settings, professional staff in crisp uniforms, and testimonials from satisfied clients. I wrote down the name of the owner, Diane Restrepo, and the general business number. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing. I typed for 3 hours straight, stopping only to make instant coffee on my hot plate. I documented everything I could remember about the Walsh household operations, their preferred vendors, the florist in Rye, the wine supplier in Terrytown, the dry cleaner on Mamaroneck Avenue who could remove any stain, their schedule of social events and charity galas, their friends' dietary restrictions and preferences, their favorite caterers and event coordinators. I noted Mrs. Walsh's prescription medications, Brandon's allergies, Ashley's beauty routine, the twins' pediatrician. Every detail, every piece of institutional knowledge I'd accumulated over 22 years, I put it all in a document titled Walsh Household Operations Manual. It wasn't revenge, exactly. It was recognition. All that invisible labor, all that knowledge that made their lives run smoothly while they treated me like furniture, I was making it visible. I was proving it had value. By midnight, I had a 47-page document. I saved it, backed it up to the cloud, and then did something that would seem small but felt enormous. I changed my laptop password from Walsh 2002, the year I started working there, to Maggie 2024. Then I started packing. I didn't own much. 22 years of living in 400 square feet doesn't leave room for accumulation. My clothes fit in 2 large duffel bags. My books, mostly library cast-offs and thrift store finds, filled a cardboard box. Kitchen items, a pot, a pan, some utensils, a set of mismatched dishes. Personal effects, photographs of my mother, my high school diploma, some costume jewelry, a hand-knit Afghan a church charity had given me one Christmas when I'd volunteered at a soup kitchen on my day off. My entire life fit in the trunk of a car. I lay down on the narrow bed, still fully clothed, and closed my eyes. I expected to lie awake, anxious, and second-guessing. Instead, I fell immediately into the deepest sleep I'd had in years. No dreams. No midnight wake-ups. Just darkness and peace. I woke at dawn, a habit too ingrained to break. For a moment, I almost got up to start Mrs. Walsh's breakfast before reality crashed back in. I wasn't making anyone's breakfast today. I wasn't making anyone's anything. The liberation was dizzying. I showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, clothes I usually only wore on my day off, and finished packing. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Rita, on my way. 20 minutes. I carried my bags down the garage stairs and set them by the door. Then I did one final thing. I walked across the driveway to the main house. I still had my key, 22 years of unrestricted access. The house was silent. The Walshes were late sleepers, especially after parties. I moved through the rooms I'd cleaned thousands of times, seeing them now with different eyes. The kitchen was a disaster, dishes piled in the sink, empty wine bottles on the counter, food remnants on the marble island. Normally, I'd have already been 2 hours into cleaning. But today, I just looked at it. Let them clean it themselves for once. Let them see how much work it actually takes to maintain their lifestyle. I left my key on the kitchen counter, next to a note I'd written on Walsh family stationery. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position. My final paycheck should include unpaid overtime for the last 22 years, as required by New York labor law. My attorney will be in contact regarding settlement. The password to the household management files on the computer in the office is Eleanor 1954. You'll find information about vendors, schedules, and procedures there. I suggest you reference it when hiring my replacement. Thank you for the opportunity. Margaret Sullivan. I didn't write best wishes or sincerely. I didn't ask them to stay in touch. I just signed my name and walked out. Rita's beat-up Honda Civic was idling in the driveway when I emerged. She jumped out, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. You did it, she said. You really fucking did it. I really fucking did, I agreed, and we both laughed, high and slightly hysterical. She helped me load my bags into her trunk. As we pulled away, I looked back once at the estate, the manicured lawn, the elegant facade, the garage studio that had been my prison home. I felt nothing. No nostalgia, no regret. Just that same clear, bright freedom. Rita's studio apartment in White Plains was small, maybe 500 square feet, but it was hers. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow. Plants sat in the windowsill. Photos of her family in Puerto Rico covered one wall. It smelled like coffee and vanilla candles. "It's not much," Rita said apologetically. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. She'd already made up the couch with sheets and a pillow. "You take the couch for now, it's actually more comfortable than my bed. We'll figure out a better arrangement later. I'm thinking we could rent a 2-bedroom together, split costs. But no pressure. You stay as long as you need." That first day passed in a strange blur. Rita went to work, leaving me with a spare key and instructions to make yourself at home, for real. I unpacked my few belongings, hung my clothes in the half of the closet Rita had cleared for me. Then I sat on the couch and felt the full weight of what I'd done settle over me. No job. No home. No plan beyond Rita's couch. I was 47 years old, with a high school diploma, 22 years of domestic service experience, and $47,000 in the bank. What was I qualified to do? Clean houses, apparently. Cook meals. Fold laundry. Serve people who didn't see me as human. The panic started to rise, that familiar tightness in my chest, the voice in my head asking what the hell I thought I was doing, whether I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. But then my phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Sullivan? This is Marcus Chen. I got your voicemail. I'd like to meet with you this week to discuss your employment situation." I met with Marcus 3 days later in his small office in Yonkers. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a quick, efficient manner. I told him everything, and he took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he sat back and steepled his fingers. "Ms. Sullivan, here's the situation. New York has strict domestic worker protection laws. If you were working the hours you described, and I believe you were entitled to overtime pay for anything over 40 hours per week. For a live-in employee, that's often a significant sum." "How significant?" He did some quick calculations. "Conservatively? Given your base salary and the hours you've described over 22 years? We're looking at somewhere between $180,000 and $250,000 in back overtime pay, plus interest and penalties." The number hit me like a physical blow. "That much?" "That much. The problem is proving the hours. Do you have any documentation? Timesheets, schedules, emails referencing your work hours?" I thought about the household management files, the calendar I'd meticulously maintained, the emails I'd sent and received using the Walsh family's shared household account. "Yes," I said slowly. "I have documentation." Marcus smiled. "Then we have a case. I'll send them a demand letter. Most families settle these things quietly, they don't want the publicity or the legal costs. But Ms. Sullivan, I need you to prepare for them to fight. They'll attack your credibility, claim you're exaggerating, maybe even accuse you of theft or misconduct." "Let them," I said, and my voice had that steel in it again. "I spent 22 years being quiet. I'm done with that." The demand letter went out on a Friday. By Monday morning, my phone was blowing up with calls from a number I recognized, the Walsh landline. I didn't answer. I'd been advised not to have any direct contact. But the voicemails they left were illuminating. First, "Mrs. Walsh, Margaret, this is Eleanor. Please call me. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We can work this out like reasonable people. You don't need to involve lawyers. Call me back, dear. Then Brandon, Maggie, what the fuck? You're suing us? After everything we did for you? You had a free place to live for 22 years. We were generous with you. This is how you repay us? You're going to regret this. Then Ashley, Maggie, it's Ashley. Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot at the party. I may have said some things I didn't mean. Why don't you come back, we'll discuss a raise, and we can forget about all this legal nonsense. We miss you. The house is a disaster without you. Please call. I saved every voicemail. Marcus had told me to document everything. The text started next. From numbers I didn't recognize, probably their friends and family members, enlisted to pressure me. You're being vindictive. This isn't like you. Mrs. Walsh is heartbroken. How can you do this to her? You're going to destroy this family over a misunderstanding about cake? I blocked each number as it came. But I won't lie, there were moments when the doubt crept in. Moments when that old voice whispered that maybe I was being unreasonable, maybe I should just apologize and move on, maybe I was burning bridges I'd regret losing. But then I'd remember Brandon's face as he said, "Nobody wants you here anymore." I'd remember Ashley dumping my cake on the ground like garbage. I'd remember 22 years of being functionally invisible while making their lives possible. And the doubt would evaporate. Rita came home from work one evening about 2 weeks after I'd left the Walshes, and she had news. You remember I told you about Diane Restrepo? The woman who runs Bella Tavola events? The catering company, yeah. Well, I mentioned you to her, just casually, didn't give details. Told her my friend was an amazing cook who'd spent 2 decades managing a high-end household. She wants to meet you. She's always looking for skilled people. Rita, I'm not sure I can go back to. It's not housekeeping, Maggie. She needs someone for event planning and kitchen management. It's a real job, with benefits and everything. Just meet with her. What's the worst that can happen? I met Diane the following Tuesday at a small cafe in Scarsdale. She was in her mid-50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and the kind of practical elegance that comes from years in the hospitality industry. She ordered us both coffee and got straight to the point. Rita tells me you have extensive experience in household management and cooking. I do. 22 years with one family. Why did you leave? I'd prepared for this question. The working conditions became untenable. I'm currently in negotiations regarding labor law violations. Diane's eyebrows rose, but she nodded approvingly. Good. Too many people in this industry get exploited because they're afraid to push back. So tell me, Margaret. Maggie. What do you actually want to do? Because I'm not just looking for another cook. I can hire cooks anywhere. I'm looking for someone who understands how wealthy families operate, what they expect, how to anticipate needs before they're articulated. I'm looking for someone who can manage complex events without falling apart under pressure. Rita says that's you. I thought about the Walsh parties I'd coordinated, the dinners I'd prepared, the crises I'd managed. That is me, I said. Can you give me an example? I told her about Mrs. Walsh's 70th birthday party, leaving out the ending, focusing on the logistics. The guest list, the vendor coordination, the timeline management, the crisis when the florist delivered the wrong color peonies and I'd had to source replacements in 3 hours. Diane listened, asking occasional questions, and I watched her mental calculation in real time. This woman knows what she's doing. Here's my situation, Diane said. My event manager just quit, she's moving to California. I need someone who can step in immediately. The pay is $62,000 annually to start, plus benefits, plus commission on events you bring in. Standard 9 to 5 hours unless we have an event, in which case you're paid overtime, actual overtime, time and a half. 2 weeks paid vacation, health insurance, 401k matching. But it's also high pressure. Our clients are demanding. They expect perfection. Can you handle that? $62,000. That was almost double what the Walshes had been paying me, and with actual overtime pay, benefits, and defined hours. It felt almost obscene. When do I start? I asked. Diane smiled. How about Monday? I started at Bella Tavola events on a Monday morning in early July. Diane threw me directly into the deep end, a July 4th weekend event for 200 guests at a private estate in Bedford. It was chaos, vendor conflicts, last-minute menu changes, a thunderstorm that forced us to move everything indoors with 2 hours' notice. And I loved every minute of it. Because here's what I discovered, I was good at this. Not just competent, genuinely talented. I could look at a space and immediately visualize traffic flow, table placement, and service logistics. I could taste a dish and know exactly what it needed. I could handle difficult clients without taking their rudeness personally because they weren't my employers, they were just customers, and the customer is not always right. More importantly, when the event was over and the client raved about how smoothly everything had run, Diane took me aside and said, "That was excellent work, Maggie. Really excellent." And I realized, I'd never heard those words before. Not in 22 years of working for the Walshes. No thank you, no well done, no acknowledgement of effort or skill. Just the expectation that everything would be perfect, and silence when it was, criticism when it wasn't. The settlement with the Walshes came through in September. After legal fees, I netted $168,000, more money than I'd ever imagined having. Marcus called to tell me the news, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. They tried to lowball us at first, but when I showed them the documentation you'd kept, they folded pretty quickly. Nobody wants a labor law violation lawsuit in the press, especially not people who care about their social standing. Did they say anything? I asked. The Walshes? Brandon's attorney said his clients felt deeply disappointed by your betrayal of trust. I told him to go fuck himself, in more professional language. I laughed. It felt good. The money changed things. Rita and I rented a proper 2-bedroom apartment in downtown White Plains, nothing fancy, but clean and bright, with a kitchen big enough for both of us to cook in. I bought furniture. Real furniture, not hand-me-downs or thrift store finds. A bed that didn't hurt my back. A dresser. A small desk where I could work on event proposals. I bought myself clothes that fit properly, that I actually liked. I got my teeth fixed, years of deferring dental work rectified in one long series of appointments. I signed up for a cooking class at the community college, not because I needed to learn the basics, but because I wanted to refine techniques, to understand food theory, to transform my practical knowledge into something more. For the first time in my adult life, I invested in myself. Work at Bella Tavola was demanding but rewarding. I coordinated weddings, anniversary parties, corporate events. I learned the business side, contracts, pricing, profit margins. Diane became a mentor, teaching me things the Walshes never had, how to value my time, how to set boundaries, how to walk away from a bad client. There's always another event, she'd say. But there's only one you. Protect your peace. By November, I'd brought in 3 major clients, former Walsh Social Circle people who remembered me, who'd been impressed by my work even when I was invisible help. They hired Bella Tavola specifically because they knew I'd be managing their events. Diane noticed. You're a secret weapon, Maggie. You know these people, you understand their world, but you're not beholden to them anymore. That's powerful. She was right. I could navigate their expectations, anticipate their needs, speak their language, but I could also say no. I could tell a client that their timeline was unrealistic or their budget insufficient. I could walk away from disrespect because I wasn't dependent on any one person's approval. It was intoxicating. One evening in late November, I was finalizing details for a Thanksgiving event when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Margaret? It's Eleanor Walsh. I hadn't heard her voice in months. It sounded older, smaller than I remembered. Mrs. Walsh, I said neutrally. I wanted to apologize. For the party. For everything. Brandon told me what he said to you, and Ashley. She trailed off. It was unconscionable. You didn't deserve that treatment. Too little, too late, I thought. But I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. We've had 3 housekeepers since you left, she continued. None of them last more than a few weeks. The house it's not the same. Brandon and Ashley are fighting constantly, there are financial issues, I think. And I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I should have treated you better. You were loyal, and we took advantage of that. Yes, I said quietly. You did. Is there any chance? No, I said, cutting her off. There's no chance. That part of my life is over. I understand. Her voice was thick. I hope you're doing well, Margaret. I am, I said. Better than I've ever been. And it was true. December came with the kind of crisp, bright cold that makes New York feel almost magical. The city dressed itself in lights and garland, and for the first time in years, I actually noticed. When you're working 80-hour weeks managing someone else's life, you don't have time to appreciate seasons changing. But now, walking to work through downtown White Plains, I found myself stopping to admire window displays, to listen to street musicians playing holiday songs, to buy myself a ridiculously overpriced peppermint mocha just because I wanted one. Small freedoms. They added up. Work at Bella Tavola had gotten progressively busier as the holidays approached, parties, corporate events, family gatherings. I was managing 4 events simultaneously, and thriving. But in a quiet moment between a tasting and a client meeting, Diane called me into her office. Sit down, Maggie. I want to talk to you about something. My stomach clenched with old instinct, that Pavlovian response to we need to talk that had been conditioned into me over 22 years. But Diane's face wasn't stern. She looked almost excited. You've been here 6 months, she said. And in that time, you've brought in more high-end clients than anyone else on my team. You understand this demographic in a way that can't be taught, you lived in their world. You know what they want before they articulate it. Thank you, I said carefully. I'm not flattering you. I'm making you an offer. She slid a folder across the desk. I want you to become a partner. Not just an employee, an actual equity partner in Bella Tavola. 30% ownership, with the option to buy more over time. You'd handle all our luxury residential events, build out that division, bring your contacts. I'd handle corporate and commercial. We'd split profits proportionally. I stared at the folder, not touching it. Diane, I don't have that kind of capital. You don't need capital. You have something better, you have access and expertise. Your sweat equity is worth more than cash to me right now. Look at the terms. Talk to a lawyer if you want. But Maggie, I think we could build something really special together. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The proposal was laid out clearly: partnership terms, profit sharing, decision-making authority, exit clauses. It was generous, almost shockingly so. Why? I asked. Why me? You barely know me. Diane leaned back in her chair. I've been in this business for 30 years, Maggie. I've seen a lot of people come and go. Most of them are either talented but unreliable, or reliable but mediocre. You're both talented and reliable, which is rare. But more than that, you're hungry. You've got something to prove. People who've been knocked down and fought their way back up, they work harder than people who've had it easy. They appreciate what they've built. That's the kind of partner I want. I took the folder home that night and read every word 3 times. Then I called Marcus Chen, who reviewed it and declared it exceptionally fair, possibly too fair. Then I sat on Rita's couch and stared at the ceiling. A partner. Not help, not an employee, a partner. An owner. Someone with a stake, with authority, with a voice that couldn't be dismissed. You're going to say yes, right? Rita asked, coming out of her bedroom in pajamas. Please tell me you're going to say yes. What if I fail? What if you succeed? She countered. Maggie, 6 months ago you were sleeping on a cot above a garage, cleaning other people's toilets for less than minimum wage when you factor in your actual hours. Now you're being offered a partnership in a successful business. What the hell do you have to lose? She was right. I called Diane the next morning and said yes. We made it official in January. There was paperwork, a small celebration at the office with champagne and cake. I'd made it myself, a proper German chocolate cake, which Diane proclaimed the best she'd ever had, and a new business card that read Margaret Sullivan, partner. I held that card and felt something I'd never experienced before: pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride in who I was and what I'd accomplished. With the partnership came new responsibilities and new opportunities. I started reaching out to former Walsh Circle contacts, people who'd seen me work, who'd benefited from my invisible labor, who now saw me as a professional equal rather than household help. The response was overwhelming. Maggie Sullivan? Oh my God, I heard you left the Walshes. Are you available for events? My daughter's getting married in June. We need someone who can handle our particular standards. The woman who managed the Walsh household? That's exactly who we need. It turned out that 22 years of invisible networking was worth something after all. I'd been in these people's homes, understood their preferences, their quirks, their unspoken expectations. And now, instead of serving them for poverty wages, I was contracting with them for professional rates. The irony was delicious. By March, I'd booked out the spring and summer seasons. Weddings, anniversary parties, graduation celebrations, charity galas. Bella Tavola's revenue in my division increased by 40%. Diane was thrilled. I was exhausted but exhilarated. And then, in early April, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I booked a cruise. Not just any cruise, the Great Lakes cruise I'd dreamed about for years. 10 days, departing from Chicago, sailing through Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, stopping at Mackinac Island, Sault Ste. Marie, Traverse City. The kind of trip I'd fantasized about when I was scrubbing the Walsh family's floors at 5 a.m., the kind of vacation that seemed impossibly luxurious for someone like me. Rita was ecstatic. Finally. You're actually doing something for yourself. I'm terrified, I admitted. What if something comes up at work? What if? Diane is perfectly capable of handling 10 days without you. You're a partner, not a slave. Partners take vacations. Book it. Now. Before you talk yourself out of it. I booked it. The deposit alone was more than I'd have made in 2 months at the Walshes. But I had money now, real money, legitimately earned, sitting in my bank account. Money that belonged to me, that I could spend on myself without guilt. I bought new luggage. Real luggage, not the battered duffel bags I'd been carrying. I bought cruise-appropriate clothes, casual dresses, comfortable walking shoes, a light jacket for cool evenings on deck. I bought a nice camera to document the trip. I even bought a journal, thinking maybe I'd write about the experience. Every purchase felt like an act of rebellion against my former life. The week before my cruise, something unexpected happened. I was at a client meeting in Scarsdale, a 50th wedding anniversary party for a couple who'd been friends with the Walshes for decades. The wife, Patricia Moreland, had specifically requested me after hearing I'd left the Walsh household. I always thought Eleanor took advantage of you, dear, she'd said during our initial consultation. You made that household run like clockwork. She never appreciated it properly. Now, as we finalized details over coffee in her sunroom, she asked casually, "Have you heard about the Walshes lately?" I'd made it a policy not to gossip about former employers, but my curiosity won. No, actually. I haven't kept up. Patricia leaned in conspiratorially. Well, my dear, it's all rather fallen apart. Brandon and Ashley are separating, some financial scandal, I heard. Bad investments, possibly fraud, though nobody's saying exactly what. They've had to sell the estate. Can you imagine? That beautiful property, gone. I absorbed this information without expression. That's unfortunate. Eleanor's moved to a small condo in White Plains. Quite a step down from that mansion. And apparently she's managing without household help. Can you imagine Eleanor Walsh doing her own cleaning? Patricia laughed, not unkindly. I suppose we all learn to be humble eventually. After the meeting, I sat in my car for a long time. The Walsh estate, sold. Brandon and Ashley, separated. Eleanor, alone in a condo, doing her own cleaning. I waited for the satisfaction to come, that vindictive pleasure of seeing your oppressors brought low. But it didn't come. I felt nothing. No triumph, no schadenfreude, not even much curiosity. They'd become irrelevant to my life. That was the real freedom, not that they'd fallen, but that their falling didn't matter to me anymore. I started the car and drove home to my apartment, where Rita was making dinner and playing music too loud, where my comfortable bed waited, where tomorrow I'd go to my office and make decisions as an equal partner in a successful business. That was enough. More than enough. The cruise departed on a Sunday morning in mid-May. I took the train to Chicago, checked into the departure hotel, and the next morning boarded the ship with 200 other passengers. The ship was smaller than I'd imagined, more yacht than cruise liner, which made it feel intimate rather than overwhelming. My cabin was tiny but efficient, with a porthole window overlooking the water. I unpacked my new clothes, arranged my toiletries in the miniature bathroom, and went up on deck as we pulled away from the Chicago harbor. The city skyline receded slowly. The lake opened up before us, vast and blue-gray under an overcast sky. I stood at the railing, wind whipping my hair, and felt something break open in my chest. I was here. I'd actually done it. After 47 years of living for other people, of deferring dreams, of making myself small and invisible, I was standing on the deck of a ship, going somewhere just for myself. I cried. Not sad tears, not angry tears. Just overwhelmed, grateful tears that I didn't bother to hide. The days on the cruise passed in a rhythm I'd never experienced before, waking without an alarm, eating meals someone else had prepared, sitting on deck with a book, attending evening lectures about Great Lakes history, making casual conversation with other passengers. People asked what I did for a living, and I said, I'm a partner in an event planning company, and watched their faces register respect. Not pity, not dismissal, respect. We stopped at Mackinac Island, and I took a bike tour around the perimeter. 8 miles of scenic coastline, with no cars allowed on the entire island. I bought myself an overpriced fudge assortment just because I wanted it. I sat on a bench overlooking the water and didn't think about work or the past or anything except how beautiful the moment was. At Traverse City, I took a wine tasting tour. I'd served wine at hundreds of Walsh events, but I'd never actually tasted it myself, never had time to develop my own palate. Now I learned to identify notes of cherry and oak, to distinguish between dry and sweet, to appreciate complexity. Every experience was a small reclamation of self. One evening, I was sitting on deck watching the sunset when an older woman sat down next to me. She introduced herself as Barbara, a retired schoolteacher from Milwaukee. Are you traveling alone, dear? She asked. I am, I said. First solo trip I've ever taken. Good for you. I didn't take my first solo trip until I was 60, after my husband passed. Spent my whole life taking care of other people, kids, husband, aging parents. Finally decided it was my turn. She smiled. Best decision I ever made. Now I take a cruise every year. We talked for an hour, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. She told me about her travels, her regrets about waiting so long, her joy at discovering who she was outside of her roles as wife, mother, daughter. Here's what I learned, Barbara said as the first stars appeared. Life is long, but it's also short. The years fly by, and if you're not careful, you wake up one day and realize you've lived entirely for other people. That you've disappeared into your service, into your duty. And then it's too late to get those years back. But it's not too late to choose differently, I said quietly. No. She patted my hand. It's never too late to choose differently. You seem like you've figured that out already, though. I'm learning, I said. On the last night of the cruise, the ship hosted a farewell dinner, a formal affair with everyone dressed up. I wore a navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, the nicest thing I'd ever owned. I did my hair and makeup carefully. I looked in the tiny cabin mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who mattered. Someone with value. Someone who existed beyond her utility to others. At dinner, I sat with Barbara and a few other solo travelers we'd befriended. We toasted to the journey, to new friends, to the adventures ahead. The food was excellent, probably not as good as what I could make myself, but I wasn't cooking, so it tasted like freedom. After dinner, I went up on deck one last time. We were sailing through the night, heading back toward Chicago. The sky was clear, and the stars were extraordinary, no city lights out here on the water, just pure darkness punctuated by pinpoints of light. I thought about where I'd been a year ago. Sleeping above a garage, pouring every ounce of my energy into a family that saw me as furniture. Making cakes that got thrown in the trash. Accepting cruelty as the price of survival. And now? Now I was a business owner. A partner. Someone with savings and prospects and friendships and agency. Someone who could take a cruise just because she wanted to, who could stand on a ship deck under the stars and know that tomorrow held possibility rather than just more servitude. I thought about my mother, who'd worked herself to death trying to give me opportunities. Who'd cleaned houses and taken night shifts and done everything she could with what little she had. I wished she could see me now. I wished I could tell her that it wasn't all for nothing, that her daughter had finally figured out her own worth. I made it, Mom, I whispered to the stars. I actually made it. I returned to White Plains on a Wednesday afternoon, tanned and rested and fundamentally changed in some way I couldn't quite articulate. Rita picked me up from the train station and demanded to hear everything. You look different, she said, studying me as we drove home. I can't put my finger on it, but you look different. I feel different, I said. I feel like I finally figured out who I am when I'm not defined by who I serve. And who are you? I thought about it. I'm someone who makes beautiful things. Who understands how to create experiences that matter. Who's good at what she does and knows her worth. I'm Maggie Sullivan, and I'm enough, exactly as I am. Rita's eyes got suspiciously wet. Damn right you are. Back at work, Diane welcomed me with good news. While I'd been gone, we'd landed a massive contract, a multi-day wedding celebration for a Manhattan family with unlimited budget. The kind of event that could define a company. They specifically asked for you, Diane said. Apparently the bride's mother knows you from somewhere. I looked at the client name and felt a jolt of recognition. Margaret Hartley, one of Mrs. Walsh's Bridge Club friends. The woman who'd been at that disastrous 70th birthday party, who'd witnessed my humiliation. Should I take it? I asked Diane. That's your call. But Maggie, you're not that person anymore. You're not the help they can dismiss. You're the professional they need. If you take this job, you take it on your terms. Clear contract, professional boundaries, appropriate compensation. You're in control now. She was right. I was in control now. I called Mrs. Hartley back and scheduled a consultation. When we met, she greeted me warmly, as an equal, with no hint of the patronizing tone I'd experienced at the Walsh household. Maggie, I've been hoping to work with you. I heard wonderful things about Bella Tavola, and when I realized you were a partner there, I knew we needed to hire you. My daughter Christina's wedding needs to be perfect, and you're the only person I trust to make that happen. We discussed details, budget, timeline. And at the end of the meeting, I presented her with our contract and our rates, premium rates, reflecting our expertise and value. She didn't blink. She just signed. Walking out of that meeting, I felt like I'd closed a circle. The same social circle that had watched me be degraded now hired me as an expert. The same world that had treated me as invisible now sought my services and paid premium prices for them. I'd turned my oppression into opportunity. My servitude into expertise. My invisibility into power. A year after I left the Walsh household, Rita and I were having dinner at our apartment, a new, bigger two-bedroom we'd moved into, with an actual dining room and a kitchen where two people could cook comfortably. You know what I realized today? Rita said, pouring us both wine. A year ago, you were terrified. You thought leaving the Walshes meant losing everything. But you didn't lose anything real. You only lost the illusion that their treatment of you was acceptable. The illusion that I needed them more than they needed me, I added. Exactly. They needed you desperately, the house fell apart without you. But you? You were always capable of more. You just needed to believe it. I raised my glass. To believing it. To believing it, she echoed. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it and smiled. Another client referral, a golden anniversary party in Greenwich, Connecticut. High-profile family, unlimited budget, specifically requesting me by name. The requests came weekly now. The invisible housekeeper had become the sought-after event planner. The woman who'd been told she was nothing more than the help was now someone whose expertise commanded respect and premium compensation. But more than that, more than the money or the success or the professional recognition, I'd found something I didn't know I'd lost, myself. Not Maggie the housekeeper, not Maggie the servant, not Maggie who exists only in relation to others' needs. Just Maggie. Margaret and Sullivan. A woman who makes beautiful cakes and coordinates beautiful events. A woman who has friends and takes cruises and owns 30% of a successful business. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who finally learned that the only person who can make you invisible is you, and the moment you refuse to disappear, the whole world has to acknowledge you're there. Sometimes I still drive past the old Walsh estate. New owners now, a young tech entrepreneur and his family. They've redone the landscaping, painted the exterior a different color, installed solar panels. It doesn't look like the place I spent 22 years of my life. I don't feel anything when I see it. No anger, no nostalgia, no regret. It's just a house. Just a place where I used to work. It doesn't define me. It never did. What defines me is what I built after. The business I helped grow. The clients I serve on my terms. The life I created from scratch, using nothing but my skills, my determination, and my refusal to stay small. Someone asked me recently if I regretted those 22 years, if I felt like I'd wasted my life in service to people who didn't appreciate me. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. Those years taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way. They taught me how high-end households operate, which I'm using now in my business. They taught me patience and efficiency and attention to detail. But most importantly, they taught me exactly what I'll never accept again. They taught me my worth by showing me what it looks like to be undervalued. And once you learn that lesson, you can't unlearn it. So it was worth it, they pressed. The experience was necessary. But staying would have been tragedy. The wisdom is in knowing when the lesson is complete, when it's time to walk away and begin something new. That's what I did. I walked away. And in walking away, I walked toward myself. The German chocolate cake recipe is still mine. I make it for special clients now, as my signature item. But I don't make it out of desperate hope for recognition. I make it because I'm damn good at it, because it's delicious, and because people pay premium prices for my skill. That cake that Ashley threw on the ground? It was never about the cake. It was about respect, visibility, value. And I found all three, but only after I stopped looking for them from people who'd proven they couldn't provide them. I found them in myself. And that, more than any amount of money or professional success, is the real happy ending. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If my story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Write in the comments if you've ever had to walk away from a situation where you were undervalued. I'd love to hear your stories. And remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. It's never too late to become visible. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Until next time, this is Maggie Sullivan, reminding you that you are enough, exactly as you are. Be well.